Jack Callahan hadn't spoken a kind word to another living soul in 3 years. He sat alone at the far end of Holt's saloon, pushing cold beans around a tin plate, when the woman appeared at his elbow, quiet as smoke, desperate as a drowning soul. "Sir," she whispered, "may we have your leftovers?" He turned, and the moment he saw her eyes bruised, blazing, refusing to break, something cracked open inside him that he thought was buried forever. Subscribe and stay until the very end, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Jack Callahan ate alone because that was the way he'd arranged his life, deliberately, stubbornly, with the kind of precision a man applies when he's decided the world has nothing decent left to give him. He'd taken the last stool at the far end of Holt's saloon, set his back against the wall, and pulled his hat low enough to make clear he wasn't looking for conversation from anybody. The barkeep, a round man named Otis, who had made the mistake of asking Jack how he was doing exactly once, had not repeated that error in 2 years. He brought Jack's coffee without a word, set it down, and moved on. That was the arrangement, and Jack appreciated it. The summer of 1878 had cooked Leadville, Colorado into something mean and dry, the kind of heat that settled into the bones of a town and made men short with each other before noon. Jack had ridden down from his ridge that morning for supplies and nothing else, and he intended to be back on the mountain before the day turned over. He was pushing cold beans around his plate, not eating so much as organizing them, when he heard her voice. "Excuse me, sir." He didn't look up. A pause. Then quieter, but no less steady. "Sir." He looked up. She was standing 3 feet away, holding a boy by the hand, a child of maybe 6 or 7, thin in the way children get when they haven't had enough to eat for a stretch of days. The woman herself was perhaps 30, though the set of her jaw gave her a harder age. Her dress was road-worn. She'd done her best to pin her hair neat, but the summer heat had pulled strands loose against the side of her face, and she hadn't bothered to fix them. She had more important things to manage. She met his eyes directly and without flinching. That was the first thing that caught his attention. "Sir," she said, her voice low and measured like she'd rehearsed this and was determined not to stumble on a single word of it. "I apologize for the interruption. I can see you're eating. I was wondering when you're finished if perhaps we might have what you don't use." Jack looked at her. He looked at the boy. The boy was staring at Jack's plate with the focused directness of a child who had gotten too hungry to pretend otherwise. He pushed the plate across the bar toward her. "Take it," he said. She didn't move right away. He could see her measuring it, looking for the cost, the string the thing attached. "It's food," he said. "Not a bargain. Not a—" She reached out and took the plate. She set it on the edge of the bar in front of the boy. Toby looked up at her. She gave a small nod. He ate carefully, quietly, without wasting a motion or a moment. Jack watched him for a few seconds. Then he turned back to his coffee. "Thank you," the woman said. A pause. He could feel her still standing there, deciding something. "We've been traveling," she said. "A few days without a proper meal." Jack said nothing. That wasn't his business. From 3 stools down, a man named Garrett, who worked the assay office and spent his evenings making himself disagreeable, leaned forward on his elbows. "You got a husband somewhere, miss?" Garrett said, looking her over with the smug ease of a man who thinks his opinions are welcome. "Or are you one of them women who just wanders in from wherever expecting good folks to feed her?" Toby's small hand tightened on the edge of the bar. The woman's jaw went rigid, but she kept her face composed the way someone does when they've had a great deal of practice keeping their face composed. "My circumstances are my own business, sir," she said. Garrett laughed, short and flat and ugly. "Ain't that a fine answer?" Jack set his coffee cup down. "Garrett," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Garrett looked over, recalibrated, and found something interesting on the underside of his hat brim. The woman turned back to Jack. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't cause it," Jack said. He gestured at the stool beside him. "Sit down. I'll get you something that isn't already cold." She hesitated just a breath. I ain't asking for anything back, he said. I'm asking you to sit down before you fall down. You look like you've been walking since Tuesday. Something shifted in her face, not softness exactly, more like the careful lowering of something she'd been holding at arm's length for a long time. She sat. The boy climbed up beside her. Jack raised 2 fingers at Otis, who nodded without comment. Jack Callahan. Jack said, not looking at her. Evelyn Montgomery, she said. Then after a beat, this is Toby. How do? Jack said to the boy. Toby looked at him with large, serious eyes. How do, sir? How old are you? 7, said Toby. You look like a 7-year-old who's walked a long way. Yes, sir. A pause. Mama says we're almost there. Jack glanced at Evelyn. She didn't say anything. Otis came back with a plate of roasted chicken cornbread and a glass of milk and set it down in front of Toby without ceremony. The boy stared at the milk for a moment, like he wasn't entirely convinced it was real. Then he wrapped both hands around the glass. Evelyn looked at the plate in front of her chicken, a thick slice of bread. Her fork hovered above it. Go on, Jack said. She ate. She ate with careful, deliberate control, each movement small and composed the way people eat, when they are not sure how long the next meal will be in coming. Jack knew that kind of eating. He'd done it himself in harder years. He respected it. He ordered himself another coffee and left her to it. It was maybe 10 minutes later, when Otis had cleared away Toby's plate and the boy had gone drowsy against the bar, with his cheek resting on his folded arms, that Jack saw it. Evelyn reached across for the salt shaker, and her sleeve rode up slightly, and there it was, a grip bruise on her wrist. The kind left when someone holds on too hard and holds on too long. The outline of 4 fingers, fading yellow-green at the edges, which meant it was old enough to have been there a week or more. He looked away. He looked back. He said nothing. But something settled into the bottom of his chest the way a stone settles at the floor of a cold river. Dense. Still. Decided. Where you headed? He said. North, she said. North's a direction. You got a destination. She looked at her coffee cup. I have a sister in Glenwood Springs. I just need to get there. You come up from the south. From Pueblo. That's a long road. We had a horse, she said. She didn't explain further, and he didn't ask. He turned his cup in his hands. Who's following you? The silence that followed was different from all the others. This one had weight. She looked at him squarely. Her eyes were dark brown, nearly black in the saloon's low light, and there was nothing fragile in them. Whatever had happened to her, whatever had brought her to this bar, asking a stranger for his leftovers, it had not broken her. It had just made her quieter, more careful. What makes you think someone's following me? She said. You haven't once looked at the door since you sat down, Jack said. Which means you've been watching it in the mirror behind the bar. Every time someone comes in, your hand goes to your son's arm. She said nothing. I ain't trying to get into your business, he said. But you asked for my leftovers and I gave you a full plate and your son's asleep against my bar, so I reckon I'm already in it a little. Something came and went behind her eyes. Then she said the name. Clayton Burke. Jack went still. He knew that name. Most people in central Colorado did if they'd been around long enough and paid attention to the kind of talk that got kept low and close. Clayton Burke was a man who hired himself out for things that other men didn't want attached to their names. Finding people. Bringing them back, or bringing back proof they were gone, depending on who was paying. He was methodical and patient, and he did not give up, which made him worth every dollar he charged. What does Burke want with you? Jack said. He was hired. Evelyn set her fork down carefully. My former husband sent him. Owen Montgomery. Owen had a judge sign papers claiming I'd abandoned our home and taken his son without his consent. Her voice stayed even, not a tremor in it, though her hand moved slowly across the bar and came to rest on Toby's back. It wasn't true. None of it was true. But Owen has money, and Owen has friends, and men like Clayton Burke don't ask many questions when the money's right. How far back is he? 2 days, maybe 3. We lost him outside of Buena Vista when we cut through the canyon. But he'll find the trail again." She paused. "He always does." Jack studied the bar in front of him for a long moment. "You've been traveling alone this whole time?" "Just me and Toby." He looked at her wrist again, the fading marks. He looked at the boy sleeping with his cheek on his arms, that small cut near his temple, nearly healed, which she had probably tended every night on the road and never mentioned to anyone. "Why'd you come to me?" he said. "There were other men in this room." "The others were looking at me," she said. He waited. "You weren't," she said. He thought about that for a moment. He thought about his cabin 4 miles north of town, up on the ridge, the one he'd built, with the specific intention that no one would ever come to it who wasn't invited. He had never once invited anyone. He thought about his wife, Margaret. He thought about the way she had looked across a supper table at him in a different life, a different Jack Callahan who had not yet learned how much a man could lose in a single season. He thought about the way Toby was breathing against the bar, slow, and even the sleep of a child who'd trained himself to come awake quickly when he had to. "I got a place," Jack said. "It ain't much, but it's 4 miles from here, and it ain't on any map that Burke's gonna have." Evelyn looked at him. "Why?" she said, simple and direct. "Because Burke's gonna come through Leadville," Jack said. "And when he does, the first thing he'll do is ask who's seen a woman with a boy, and Garrett down there is going to remember you real clearly." She glanced toward Garrett, who was making a careful study of his own hands. "You don't know me," she said. "No," he said. "I could be anybody." "You could," he said. "But you're not. You're a woman with a bruise on your wrist, and a boy who's too thin, and a sister in Glenwood Springs, and that's enough for me to know." He pushed back from the bar. "I know the road north. I can get you as far as the Eastern Pass. From there it's a straight line, and you'd be through in a day." She looked at Toby for a long moment, at the rise and fall of his small back. "All right," she said. Jack went to settle with Otis. The barkeep leaned across the counter and slid something toward him, a folded piece of paper, quiet as a secret. "Man came in earlier," Otis said, his voice barely carrying. "Before you arrived. Showed this around." Jack unfolded it. It was a notice hand-printed, not typeset, which meant it hadn't come from any sheriff's office. At the top, reward $200. Below that, a description. Dark-haired woman, early 30s, traveling with a young boy. And at the bottom, a name and contact address. Clayton Burke. $200. In the summer of 1878 in Leadville, Colorado, that was a figure that made quiet men loud. It was the kind of money that turned something a man had been sitting on into something worth saying out loud. Jack refolded the paper and put it in his vest pocket. He looked up slowly. At the far end of the bar, 3 men he didn't recognize had their heads tilted together, speaking in the kind of murmur that means a decision is being made. And one of them, the one on the end, raw-boned and sharp-eyed, was looking at Evelyn Montgomery with the flat, measuring attention of a man doing arithmetic. Jack walked back to her. "We need to go," he said, quietly, directly. "Now." She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. She put her hand on Toby's shoulder, and the boy came awake immediately, the fast-practiced waking of a child who had learned not to sleep too deep. "Mama, we're going," she said. "Come on, sweetheart. On your feet." Toby slid off the stool. He reached up and took her hand, and then he turned and looked at Jack with his serious dark eyes. "Are you coming too, sir?" he asked. Jack looked down at the boy. At the trust in that question, uncomplicated, plain offered without any of the caution his mother had rightly built into herself. "Yeah," Jack said. "I'm coming." He put himself between them and the rest of the room as they moved to the door. He didn't look at the 3 men at the end of the bar, but he registered them, their positions, the one who had started to stand, and then settled back when Jack's shoulder turned toward him. Outside, the summer evening pressed close and warm, the sky going deep amber above the rooftops of Leadville. Evelyn adjusted Toby's collar with quick, practiced hands. "My things are at the boarding house," she said, 1 block east." How long? 5 minutes. I'll get the horses. Meet me at the east end of the road. Don't go back through the saloon. I won't. He was already turning when she said his name. Mr. Callahan. He stopped. Thank you, she said. Different from the first time. The first one had been relief. This one had something compressed inside it, something that had been waiting a long time for a place to land. Jack nodded, once pulled his hat down, and walked toward the livery. He didn't let himself think too much about it. Thinking too much was how a man talked himself out of the right thing. He'd done that before, stood at the edge of a decision, and waited until the moment had slipped past, and he had lived every day since, with what that cost him. He was not going to do it again. He saddled Burl his gray roan and arranged a second mount from the liverymen for a fair price, and no questions asked. He led both horses to the east end of the road and stood with them in the gathering dusk. 4 minutes later, Evelyn came around the corner with Toby beside her and a single canvas bag on her shoulder, small enough that a child could carry it. Everything she had in the world, apparently in one bag. She looked at the horses. Can he ride? Jack said, nodding at Toby. He can hold on, she said. Good enough. He lifted Toby up first, and the boy gripped the pommel in both hands and sat straight and solemn, trying visibly to look like someone who had done this before. Jack gave the horse a calm pat and handed the reins to Evelyn, who mounted without assistance, smooth and quiet. Jack swung up onto Burl. 4 miles north, he said. Stay close and don't light a lantern till I say. Understood, she said. He clicked his tongue. Burl moved forward. Behind him, he heard the second horse fall into step. He kept his eyes ahead, but he was aware of them. The woman and the boy following a man they'd met an hour ago over a plate of cold beans, riding into the dark, because they had no better option, and he was what had shown up. And Jack Callahan, who had spent 3 years constructing the kind of quiet life that required nothing of him and asked for nothing back, felt something settle into his chest, alongside the old stone weight he carried everywhere. It wasn't hope. He knew what hope felt like, or he had known it once, and it had never felt like this. This was something older and less bright. It felt like purpose, like something that had been pointed in no direction for a very long time had finally found one. He kept riding. Behind him, a small voice came through the warm evening air. Mr. Callahan. Yeah. Is it very far? Not too far, Jack said. Okay, said Toby, and went quiet. Jack rode on, the paper in his vest pocket pressed against his ribs. Clayton Burke's name on a hand-printed notice. $200. A man at the end of the bar doing arithmetic. 2 days back on a trail, maybe 3, but men like Burke made up time when they had reason to, and $200 was reason enough. They had time. Not much, but some. Jack had learned in the years since losing everything he'd ever loved that some was enough to work with. Some was what you built on when there was nothing else left. He was going to make it enough. The road north of Leadville was the kind of dark that has weight to it, the kind that sits on a man's shoulders and reminds him how small a lantern is against a Colorado night. Jack kept Burl at a measured pace, not rushing, not dawdling. Behind him, he could hear the second horse keeping step, and the occasional soft word from Evelyn to Toby, keeping the boy anchored. He didn't speak for the first mile. He listened instead to the road, to the timber on either side, to the quality of quiet that told him whether it was the quiet of nothing or the quiet of something holding still. It was the first kind. For now. You ride well, he said without turning. My father kept horses, Evelyn said. Before the money ran out. Where'd you grow up? Tennessee, a long time ago. A pause. I came west with Owen when I was 22. He made it sound like adventure. Most things sound like adventure before you're in them, Jack said. That's true, she said. That's very true. Toby's voice floated up between them, alert, in spite of the hour. Mr. Callahan, can your horse go fast? Faster than you'd want to ride right now in the dark, Jack said. I'm not scared of fast. No, I don't reckon you are. He glanced back. The boy was sitting upright in front of his mother, hands on the pommel, chin forward. But Burl's got enough sense to know dark roads and speed don't go together, and I trust his judgment. Does your horse have good judgment? Toby asked. Better than most men I've known. Toby considered this with the gravity that children bring to information about animals. I had a horse, he said. Mama had to leave her. I know, Jack said. Do you think she's all right? Our horse. Jack glanced at Evelyn. She was looking forward, her face composed the way it always was, carrying whatever that cost her quietly and without performance. Horse in good country in summertime does fine on her own, Jack said. Animals are resourceful, more than we give them credit for. Good, Toby said with a finality that closed the subject. They rode another half-mile in silence. Then Evelyn said, Tell me about this cabin. Nothing to tell. 4 walls and a roof. How far from the main road? Far enough. He checked the line of trees on his left without moving his head. Burke would need someone local who knew the approach. Even then, it's not easy to find in the dark. But possible. Most things are possible, Jack said. I don't plan around what's impossible. I plan around what's likely. And what's likely tonight? Tonight likely is that Burke's in Leadville, or 1 camp south, and he's getting information from somebody who saw us leave. By morning he's got a direction. By midday he's on the road. He kept his voice level. We've got time. Not a lot, but some. You said that before, she said. That some is enough. It is, he said. If you use it right. She didn't answer immediately. He heard her shift in the saddle behind him, not discomfort adjustment. The posture of a woman recalculating. You're very calm, she said. I've been through worse. What's worse than this? Jack didn't answer. Some things you didn't put on a night road with a woman you'd just met, no matter how directly she asked. When the cabin came into view, dark shape against darker trees, no lamplight showing, he heard Evelyn release a breath she'd been carrying for a while. It's real? She said very quietly, like she'd half expected there to be nothing there. Said it was, Jack said. He dismounted and helped Toby down, then tied both horses around back where they wouldn't be visible from the road. Evelyn was on the ground by the time he came back around her canvas bag over one shoulder, scanning the dark the way she always did, quick, comprehensive, recording everything. He pushed the door open and stood aside. She walked in first. Toby went straight to the stone hearth and pressed his palm flat against it, the way children do when something about a thing genuinely interests them. It's warm, he said. Rock holds heat, Jack said. Sat in the sun all day. Evelyn was looking around the room slowly. 1 table, 2 chairs. A shelf with supplies, flour, salt, coffee, canned goods. A rifle on the wall, and a second one leaning in the corner. The loft above accessible by a short ladder. It's clean, she said. I live here, Jack said. Not in it. She turned and looked at him. Is there a difference? Man who lives in a place gets comfortable, he said. Comfortable makes him slow. I stay ready. He moved toward the window without lighting the lamp, checking the road by the thin moonlight, the way habit had trained him to do every time he entered a room. You can have the loft. The boys sleep well up there. I'll stay down here. You don't have to give up your bed for us, she said. I don't sleep in the bed. I sleep in the chair. A pause. Mr. Callahan? Don't ask me to explain it, he said. Some things just are. She didn't ask. He appreciated that. He brought water in from the barrel outside and set it on the table without ceremony. She moved around the room gathering what she needed, a cloth, a cup, and got Toby's hands and face cleaned up with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had managed this routine in far worse circumstances than a mountain cabin. Toby submitted with the patient resignation of a child who had learned that protesting the washing was a battle not worth the cost. When she'd gotten Toby up the ladder and settled on the pallet, she came back down and sat at the table. She sat straight the way she always did, not rigid, just upright, like she was ready for whatever the next thing was going to be. Jack was in the chair with his hat off, turning it by the brim. How much does he know, Jack said, about why you're running? He knows we're going to Aunt Nora's. He knows his papa was cruel to his mama. She looked at her hands flat on the table. He's 7. I've tried to give him as much truth as a 7-year-old can carry without being flattened by it. Smart, Jack said. Necessary, she said, which was a different thing, and she knew it. The bruise on your wrist, Jack said. How long? She pulled her sleeve up slightly and looked at it like she'd almost forgotten it was there. 10 days. He grabbed me when I told him I was leaving. I thought he'd try to stop me right then, but he let me go. He was very calm about it. She paused. That's when I knew he was going to send someone instead. Jack looked at the bruise, at the shape of 4 fingers in fading yellow-green. He filed it away, not the way a man files away something that makes him angry, but the way a man files away something that informs a decision he has already started making without realizing it. There's something else, Evelyn said. He looked up. Her hands went flat on the table again, one on top of the other. The posture of a person organizing themselves around something difficult. The real reason Owen sent Burke, she said. It isn't just Toby. Not entirely. Jack waited. Owen Montgomery is the majority owner of 3 mining claims outside of Pueblo, filed under false names and forged survey rights. He took that land from 2 families, the Harlans and the Deckers, paid men to burn their houses, and convinced a county judge the land was unclaimed territory. She met Jack's eyes and held them. I know this because I was his bookkeeper for 3 years before I understood what I was recording. And when I understood, I copied everything I could reach before I left. Every ledger entry, every forged transfer deed, every payment record. Jack was very still. Where are the copies? He said. Sewn into the lining of the bag, she said. He let that settle. So Burke isn't just bringing you back, Jack said. Owen needs those papers destroyed. Without them, a federal land commissioner could take every claim he holds, the mines, the house, the money, all of it gone. He'd very likely face prison. She held his gaze evenly. Burke wasn't hired to find a runaway wife. He was hired to recover the bag, or to come back and tell Owen there's nothing left to worry about. The room was very quiet. Outside, something moved in the trees. Probably just wind. Probably just a branch settling, and Jack's head came up and then settled back when he placed the sound. You've been riding across this territory, Jack said slowly, with a 7-year-old boy, 1 canvas bag, and evidence that could send a powerful man to prison. Yes. And you didn't mention this before now. I didn't know if I could trust you before now, she said. Not defensive. Plain. He stood from the chair. He went to the window and looked out into the dark, the way he always did, when a new piece of information had just changed the shape of everything around him, not panicking, just recalibrating, letting the map redraw itself. That reward notice on the bar, he said. $200. That's not what this kind of job pays. It was meant to look ordinary, she said. A man hunting his runaway wife. A modest reward. Nothing to draw attention from the wrong people. What's Burke actually being paid? I don't know the number, but Owen has more than he'll ever use, and Clayton Burke knows exactly what he's been sent to recover. She paused. He'd pay whatever Burke named. Jack turned back from the window. How many men does Burke travel with? When I last saw him outside of Buena Vista, he had 2 riders with him, but he picks up local men when he gets close to a target. Men who know the territory and don't ask questions. Leadville men, Jack said, possibly by now. He thought about the 3 men at the end of the bar, the raw-boned one looking at Evelyn with the flat attention of a man doing arithmetic. He thought about how fast a telegram moved and how long they'd been on the road. Get some sleep, he said. You're not. I'll be awake. He crossed to the chair and sat back down. Go on. She didn't move. I've been the only one awake for 3 nights, she said. 2-hour turns on the road keeping Toby close, never really going under. She looked at him with those dark, direct eyes. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because when you say you'll be awake, I believe you. And I want you to know That is the first time in a very long time I have believed that sentence from anybody. Jack looked at her for a moment. Go upstairs, he said. She stood, moved toward the ladder, stopped with her hand on the first rung. What was her name? She said. Your wife. His jaw moved. Margaret. She was fortunate, Evelyn said, to have had a man like you. He didn't answer. She went up the ladder and he heard the pallet settle as she lay down. And then there was quiet and Jack sat in his chair with his rifle across his knees and the paper with Burke's name in his vest pocket and the dark pressing against the window from outside. He sat that way for 3 hours. He didn't sleep. He hadn't promised sleep and he didn't attempt it. He listened to the cabin breathe the particular sounds of 2 people in the loft, the boy's even rhythm and the woman's slower, deliberate breath, the breath of someone consciously releasing tension for the first time in days. He sat with the sounds of the mountain outside, the wind, the trees, the horses shifting around back. And then something else, a horse on the road, not his horses. A sound that came from the wrong direction and stopped too deliberately. Jack was on his feet before he'd finished processing it. He went to the window without lighting anything and looked out into the dark. The road below, nothing moving. Then footsteps on loose gravel, slow, deliberate, stopping. He eased the back door open and slipped outside, pressing himself flat against the outer wall. He waited, counting breaths. When he moved around to the roadside, his boot came down on something in the dirt. He crouched without thinking and picked it up. A piece of cloth. Dark blue, town-cut, not mountain country fabric. And tied around it a short length of cord with a small notch cut into it. He had seen that mark before. 4 months ago, outside the assay office in Leadville, on a piece of tack hanging from Clayton Burke's saddle horse, when Burke had come through looking for a man named Ritter, and found him and taken him south in chains. Jack had noticed the cord then, because he noticed things other men let slide past. Burke had been on this road. Not at the cabin itself, not that close yet, but on the road that led here. Recent. Within the last 2 hours. He wasn't 2 days back. He hadn't been 2 days back since Buena Vista. Jack went back inside and went straight up the ladder. Evelyn was awake before his boot touched the second rung. Her eyes were open and clear. No drowsiness in them, just immediate sharp attention. Burke's been on the road, Jack said, keeping his voice low. Recent. He's not behind you. He's beside you. She sat up without a sound. She looked at Toby, still sleeping, his breathing slow and even. How close? She whispered. Close enough to have this cabin mapped by morning if he's got someone guiding him, which he likely does by now. He crouched at the side of the pallet. We've got until first light. After that, the road's compromised. She pressed her lips together, looked at her son, looked back at Jack. We run at first light, she said. North Road's the one he'll expect, Jack said. He'll have it covered, but there's a cut through the timber behind the cabin. Comes out half a mile from Carpenter's Crossing. Stage stop. Morning stage goes south to Denver at 8:30. She understood immediately. The bag. Your papers. A letter of delivery addressed to the Federal Land Commissioner in Denver. Man named Harold Fitch, I know him. Worked with him 12 years ago. He's honest, and he's got no connection to Owen Montgomery whatsoever. And if the papers reach him, Owen loses the claims regardless of where you are or what Burke does to recover the bag. Without those ledgers in Owen's hands, there's nothing to hide. The commissioner does his job, and Owen answers for it through the law. She was very quiet turning this over. 4 miles through timber in the dark with a child, she said. We wait for first light. We move fast. And Burke. We deal with Burke when Burke gives us cause, Jack said. Right now we move smart. She looked at him, that careful measuring look. And something in it shifted. Not all the way open, but open enough. All right, she said. He was turning back to the ladder when she said his name. Jack. He stopped. Owen kept files on men in the territory, she said. Men he considered complications, Problems that needed managing. She paused. Your name was in it. He turned back. He knows about a Jack Callahan who worked for the Territorial Surveyor's Office and filed a disputed land claim in San Juan County 12 years ago. Tied up two of Owen's early acquisitions for nearly a year. She held his gaze. He called you a problem that had gone quiet. Jack said nothing. I saw your name in that file before we left Pueblo, she said. When I recognized you at the bar tonight, I sat down next to you because you weren't looking at me wrong. That was true. But I also knew your name. I thought if anyone in Leadville understood what Owen Montgomery was capable of, it might be you. The room was very still. I filed that claim for a family named Briggs, Jack said. Emma Briggs, widow with 4 children. Owen's man had forged a transfer deed, and she didn't have $2 for a lawyer. A pause. The claim held. They kept their land. Owen never forgot it, Evelyn said. Jack stood with one hand on the ladder. The Briggs family, he said. His voice had changed lower. Emma Briggs's oldest boy was named Daniel. He was 14 that winter. Evelyn waited. Daniel Briggs is the one who found my wife. Jack stopped. Started again on different ground. Margaret was helping Emma through a difficult time when Daniel came for her. She rode out in a bad storm to be with them. He stopped again, looked at the wall. I lost them both that night, Margaret and the child she was carrying. Evelyn went very still. So Owen Montgomery, Jack said quietly, cost me my wife, at enough distance that he'd never feel the weight of it. The way powerful men do their damage indirectly through consequences they don't stick around to see. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say anything for a moment. She looked at him the way she looked at everything directly, carefully holding what she saw without flinching from it. I'm not telling you this so you'll carry it, Jack said. I'm telling you because you should understand that I'm not helping you out of general goodness. He met her eyes. I'm a man who's been sitting in a chair for 3 years waiting for a reason to stand up. You handed me one. He went to the ladder. Try to sleep. I'll wake you at first light. He went down. From the pallet, Toby stirred. Mama. Right here, sweetheart, Evelyn said. Are we going soon? At first light. Toby was quiet for a moment. Then, Mr. Callahan. Jack stopped at the base of the ladder. Yeah. Is my papa's man going to find us? He could have softened it. He looked at the ceiling of the loft and thought about what the boy deserved. He's going to try, Jack said. That's honest. But I'm going to work real hard toward making sure he doesn't get what he came for. That's the best I can offer you. Toby absorbed this. That's honest, he said. Yeah. Papa never told me honest things. He told me things that sounded good. A pause. I think honest is better, even when it's scary. Jack stood at the base of the ladder for a moment in the dark, with a 7-year-old's words sitting in his chest like something warm he didn't entirely know what to do with. Me too, son, he said. Get some sleep. He went back to his chair. The night moved slowly. He sat with his rifle watching the window lighten by degrees, black to deep gray, to the pale, thin gray that means the sun is on its way, but not yet committed. When the gray got pale enough to see by, he moved to the window. 2 riders on the road below the tree line. Moving slow and deliberate, not traveling, scouting, checking sight lines, mapping the approach. And in a stand of scrub oak 50 yards off the road, a 3rd man on a horse, not moving, just watching the cabin with the patience of someone who has done this kind of work before and knows that the waiting is the job. Jack counted what he could see. 3, possibly more further back. Burke didn't come himself for the early work. He sent men ahead to find the exits. That was his method, methodical, patient, systematic. Jack turned from the window. Evelyn was already on the ladder, already dressed, hairpinned bag on her shoulder, Toby beside her with sleep-mussed hair and serious eyes. They're here, she said. 3 on the approach, maybe more behind. He crossed to the corner and took the second rifle, checked it, set it against the table. North road's blocked. We go through the timber the way I said. Now. Now. She took Toby's hand. Toby looked at Jack. Should I be scared? He asked. Only enough to be careful, Jack said. Not so much it slows you down. Toby nodded like this was the most sensible thing he'd heard in a while. Jack moved to the back door. He checked the timber line through the crack before he opened it. Clear nobody on the back side yet, and pushed it wide and put himself out first. They came out of the cabin and were 20 yards from the tree line when the shout came from the roadside of the cabin. Not a warning. A recognition call, the sound a man makes when he spots exactly what he's been looking for. Move, Jack said. Evelyn grabbed Toby and ran. Jack came behind them, rifle in his right hand. His attention split between the trees ahead and the corner of the cabin where the road cut through. He heard boots on gravel, fast and closing. A man came around the corner, young, lean, with a deputy badge pinned at the careless angle of something borrowed or bought. He had a gun drawn, and he was breathing hard. He looked at Jack. Jack looked at him. They stood 10 feet apart in the early morning gray. That woman comes with me, the man said. No, Jack said. She doesn't. Mister, I got men behind me and Clayton Burke behind them. You don't want to make this hard. Son, Jack said, with the particular unhurried calm of a man who has genuinely run out of things to be afraid of. I have been waiting 3 years to make something hard, but you look like somebody's boy, and I don't want this to be the worst day of your life. He held the man's gaze steady and unblinking. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to step back around that corner. You're going to tell Burke you didn't see anything, and then you're going to think real seriously about who you're working for and what it's worth to you. The man's jaw moved. His gun hand was not entirely steady. Burke'll come himself, he said. I know it. He won't stop. I know that too. A long beat of silence. That woman do something wrong, the man said. He sounded younger. Suddenly the hard edges stripped off, like the question had been sitting in him since he'd taken the job. No, Jack said. She did everything right. A powerful man just doesn't like it. The man looked past Jack toward the trees. He looked back at Jack. And then he took one step back, then another. His gun dropped 2 inches. His face worked through something Jack didn't have a name for and didn't need one. Then he turned and walked back around the corner of the cabin. His boots on the gravel went slower going back than they'd come. Jack didn't wait to find out what that meant. He turned and went into the trees at a run. Evelyn was crouched 30 yards in with Toby pressed close against her. She looked up when Jack came through. He didn't follow, Jack said. Why? Don't know. Don't intend to spend time finding out. He looked at the bag on her shoulder. Papers still in there. Haven't left my side since Pueblo, she said. Then let's move. He set a pace through the timber fast, but measured the pace of a man who knows the country underfoot, and Evelyn matched him stride for stride without complaint, and Toby ran between them, with his arms pumping and his breathing hard, but not panicked. Behind them, from the direction of the cabin, a voice cut through the morning air, low, commanding the voice of a man reorienting his men after an unexpected outcome. Not Burke in person. Not yet. But close. Jack pushed forward. Carpenter's Crossing was 4 miles east through timber that didn't get easier as it went, and the morning stage ran at 8:30 and did not wait for anyone. The gap between where they stood and where they needed to be was measured in minutes and terrain, and Jack was already calculating both. He thought about Harold Fitch in Denver and what those papers could do in the right hands. He thought about the thin, exhausted set of Evelyn's shoulders in front of him, and the way Toby ran with everything he had without asking for anything back. He thought about Margaret briefly, the way he always did when something cracked the sealed room where he kept her, a flash of her, just her face, nothing dramatic, just the face of the only person who had ever made him feel like the best version of what he could be. Then he put it away. There was road ahead, and time was burning, and the timber didn't care about a man's grief. He kept moving. They all did. And somewhere behind them, Clayton Burke was coming. The timber behind them had gone quiet, which was the kind of quiet that made Jack move faster rather than slower. Quiet in pursuit terrain didn't mean nobody was there. It meant somebody had stopped making noise on purpose. He kept the pace fast enough to count, careful enough to sustain. Evelyn matched him stride for stride through the worst of it. Her skirt hitched at the knee, her breathing controlled and deliberate. Toby ran between them with his arms pumping and his chin forward, and his boots finding ground in the dark of the tree cover, with a focus that had nothing childlike about it. They were a quarter-mile in when Toby went down, not hard. One knee to the ground, a sharp intake of breath, and then he was back up before Jack had fully turned, brushing dirt from his knee with the matter-of-fact efficiency of a child who understood that staying down cost more than getting up. "I'm fine," he said before anyone could speak. "Good," Jack said. "Keep moving." He dropped back 3 steps and listened behind them. What he heard was specific: 2 men on foot working through timber, their footsteps deliberate and widely spaced, which meant they'd left the horses and come in quiet, which meant Burke was directing this personally and with method. He said nothing to Evelyn. He angled their course 3 degrees south without explanation, and when she glanced at him sideways, he said, "Trust me." And she did without question, which still landed oddly in a chest that had stopped expecting that from anyone. The timber thinned. The ground flattened. He heard the road before he could see it. The compressed earth sound of a crossing voices the stamp of harnessed horses. The stage was there. The 4-horse team was already in lines, the driver up top adjusting his reins, 2 passengers waiting near the door. A station hand was loading the last piece of luggage. The driver looked down at 3 people coming out of the tree line at a half run, and his eyebrows went all the way up. "Stage is closed," he said. "I don't need passage," Jack said, already moving. "I need to send a parcel. We don't take loose freight at a crossing stop. You take a letter, and you've hauled for the commissioner's office." He stopped at the stage wheel and looked up. "Harold Fitch, Federal Land Commissioner, Denver. You know that name?" The driver chewed something for a moment. "Hauled for his office twice." "Then you know Fitch does things right. I need a packet in his hands before end of business today. His hands, not the general office. That's a personal delivery, costs extra. I'll pay it. Stage leaves in how long?" 4 minutes. I need paper and a pencil." The station master, a compact man named Greer, who had the look of someone who'd seen everything and had stopped reacting to any of it, came out with a sheet and a pencil stub and set them on the side of the stage without comment. Jack wrote fast. His handwriting was not elegant, but it was clear, and he kept it to what mattered. Herald evidence of land fraud enclosed Pueblo County, 3 claims forged deeds, 2 families displaced by force. Witness is alive and prepared to testify. Her name is Evelyn Montgomery, and she will contact you within the week. Open the ledgers first. They speak plainly. J. Callahan. While he wrote, Evelyn had already unsealed the lining of her bag. Her hands steady, her movements exact, a woman who had planned this specific moment and was executing it without wasted motion. She handed him the copied ledger pages. He wrapped them in the letter, sealed it with the station master's wax, and handed it up along with $3. "End of business today," Jack said, his hands. "I heard you the first time," the driver said. He tucked the packet under the seatboard. "We're moving." The stage lurched forward, and a man stepped out of the timber at the far end of the crossing. He was older than the deputy from the cabin road, heavier with a beard grown past the point of intention, and the flat, patient eyes of someone who spent most of his working life standing still and waiting for outcomes to develop. His hand rested on the butt of his pistol, not drawn, just present the way men announce capability without committing to action. He looked at Jack. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at the stage moving away around the bend. His jaw tightened. "That's a problem," he said. "Only for some of us," Jack said. The man's eyes went to the bag on Evelyn's shoulder. "I'll take that, ma'am." Evelyn put both hands on the strap. She looked at the man the way she looked at everything, straight at it, without shifting back. "No," she said, flat and plain and without any performance at all. The man uncrossed his arms. "Burke's going to want to hear that from you himself." "Then he can come hear it," she said. And as if the name had weight enough to move him, a second man came out of the timber 20 yards to the left. Then a third. And then Clayton Burke walked out of the tree line, and he was not what Jack had been expecting. Burke was somewhere past 50 spare and unhurried, dressed in clothes, too clean for the trail he'd supposedly covered. He was the kind of man who maintained himself carefully, because he'd learned that appearance was a form of authority that didn't require drawing a weapon. He wore no badge. He walked across the open ground of the crossing without haste, like the ending of this had already been settled, and he was simply present to observe the last few motions of it. He stopped 15 feet from Jack. "Mr. Callahan," he said. His voice was mild, almost pleasant, the voice of a man who had never in his professional life needed to raise it. "Owen described you accurately. Principled, stubborn, difficult to reason with through conventional means." A pause. "He meant those as criticisms. I'm less certain." "The stage is gone," Jack said. "I saw it leave. I put something on it." "I saw that too." Burke looked at Evelyn with an expression that was not unkind, which made it stranger. "Mrs. Montgomery, you look well given everything." "I am well," she said. "Given everything." "Owen wants you to come home." "Owen wants a great many things he has no right to," she said. "That's always been his core difficulty." Burke almost smiled. "The papers you copied. I need you to understand something about them before you place too much confidence in where they've gone." He paused, and the pause was deliberate, the weight of a man setting something significant down on a table before asking you to look at it. "Harold Fitch has a deputy commissioner named Gerald Ames. Gerald Ames has been on Owen's payroll for 4 years. Whatever arrives at the Denver office passes through Ames's desk first." The crossing went very still. Jack looked at Evelyn. Her face was composed, perfectly carefully composed. But something behind her eyes was working very hard and very fast. "The papers alone aren't sufficient," Burke continued. "They need a witness who can testify to their origin and the circumstances of their collection. Which means you, Mrs. Montgomery, are the only element that gives those ledgers any legal standing at all." He looked at her steadily. "And you're standing in a mountain crossing with 3 of my men and no clear road forward." Jack said nothing. He was counting. He was also listening because Burke was very calm about something that should have been producing urgency, and calm men who have already won don't explain themselves this carefully. "The boy," Jack said. Burke looked at him. "You said she comes with you, and then collects her son," Jack said. "Where is he right now?" Burke held his gaze for a beat, just a fraction too long. Jack turned around. Toby was not where he had been standing. He turned a full circle. The station building, the hitching rail, the road bending south, the timber line north. He looked at every visible inch of that crossing, and Toby was not in any of it. Evelyn turned. She saw what Jack saw. Her entire body went rigid, not with fear, but with something colder and more focused. Something that had no room in it for anything except the single problem directly in front of her. "Where is my son?" Her voice was very quiet and very still. "He's safe," Burke said. "He's with one of my men. He'll remain that way as long as this conversation stays productive." Jack looked at the 3 men arranged across the crossing. He looked at Burke. He did the arithmetic: 1 rifle, 4 guns, 40 feet of open ground between him and the nearest tree cover, and a boy somewhere in the timber in an unknown direction. He thought about Toby's hand in his, in the dark. He reached out and took the canvas bag from Evelyn's shoulder. She turned to him sharply. "The bag," he said to Burke. He held it at his side. "You want the bag. I'll give it to you. You tell me where the boy is. Right now. Not when the conversation's done. Right now." Burke studied him. "You'd give up the evidence." "I'd give up the bag to know he's safe," Jack said. "Yes, without hesitation." "The papers inside." "Her son is 7 years old," Jack said. His voice stayed level. It stayed plain. "I am not going to stand here negotiating paper while a child is somewhere in those trees with a man who burns down houses for a living. You tell me where he is, and you get the bag. That's the only trade I'm offering." The crossing was completely silent. Burke looked at him for a long moment, the look of a man revising a calculation he thought was already finished. Then a voice came from the timber behind Jack. Not Burke's man. A different voice. "He's here." Jack turned. The young deputy from the cabin rode. Denny stepped out of the south timber with Toby at his side. Not held, not restrained. Just walking the boy's arms, swinging freely, his expression more curious than frightened. Denny stopped at the clearing's edge. He had his hat in his hand. "Nobody took him," he said. He was talking to Jack, not Burke. "He wandered toward the trees when everybody was talking. I went after him." He put one brief hand on Toby's shoulder, careful and uncertain, like a man who wasn't entirely sure he'd earned the gesture. "I brought him back." Burke's face went completely still. "Denny," he said, quiet and flat. "I'm done," Denny said. His voice was not loud, but it had the quality of something decided from the inside rather than performed for an audience. "Done with this job. Done since the cabin." He looked at Evelyn. "I'm sorry, ma'am, for whatever part I played in frightening you." Evelyn looked at the young man for a moment. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing him back." Toby crossed to his mother and pressed himself against her side. She put her arm around him, without looking down, keeping her eyes on Burke, keeping the thread of the moment from coming apart. Burke watched his deputy walk to the edge of the south road and stop there. He looked at Jack. He looked at the bag. "Keep it," Burke said. Jack looked at him. "Keep the bag." Burke reached into his coat slowly, deliberately, the movement of a man who understands that reaching quickly in a tense clearing is an error, and produced a folded document. He held it out toward Jack. "Before you decide what this morning means, you should read this." Jack didn't move toward it. "What is it?" he said. "An affidavit," Burke said. "Signed by Gerald Ames. Notarized 3 weeks ago in Denver. Ames has agreed to testify against Owen Montgomery in exchange for immunity on his own misconduct." He held it steadily. "I have been working for the Federal Land Commissioner's office for 6 months, Mr. Callahan. Not for Owen Montgomery." Evelyn's breath came out in a short, sharp sound. "Owen hired me," Burke said. His voice was still measured, still even, but it had lost the pleasant professional surface, and what was underneath it was plainer. "He hired me to find his wife and the papers she took. I took the job. I then contacted the commissioner's office in Denver, disclosed everything Owen had told me, and we arranged a course of action." He set the document on the edge of the water trough. "The papers on that stage are going to a commissioner who has been building this case for 6 months and was waiting for physical documentation to close it. Your letter to Fitch was not unnecessary. It was exactly what he needed to know. The documentation was genuine, and the chain of custody was clean." Jack crossed to the trough and picked up the document. He read it twice. Slowly. Ames's signature. Fitch's countersignature. The notary seal. The date. The scope. He had worked with surveying documents long enough to know a real instrument from a constructed one. This was real. He looked up. "Why the chase?" he said. "If you're with the commissioner, why run us through the timber?" "Because Owen has men in this territory who are not working for the commissioner," Burke said. "Until that stage left this crossing, those papers were in play. If Owen's people had taken them before the stage cleared..." He paused. "I needed you moving. Moving targets are harder to pin than stationary ones, and I needed the documentation in transit before anyone along Owen's network had time to respond to the news that his wife had been located." "You used us," Jack said. "I kept you alive," Burke said, "which required you to keep moving." "Yes." Evelyn stepped forward. "You let me run across 3 counties," she said. "You let my son sleep on the ground. You let me believe we were being hunted like criminals." "You were being hunted," Burke said, "by Owen's men. I was keeping their attention on me rather than your actual route. I couldn't contact you. I couldn't explain myself without risking that Owen's people would intercept the communication and the case would collapse. You could have found me in Pueblo before I left. Owen had me watched from the moment he hired me. If I'd made contact with you in Pueblo, we'd both be in a county jail right now, and the ledgers would be ash." He looked at her. His expression shifted not much, just enough to let something more genuine come through the professional surface. "I am sorry for what it cost you, and for what it cost your son. It was necessary. I know that is not the same as all right." Evelyn stared at him for a long time. The crossing was quiet, except for the horses. "The Harlan family," she said, "and the Deckers. Being notified this week, restitution is a central part of the case, their land or fair value." She said nothing. Jack refolded the affidavit. He held it out to Burke. Burke shook his head. "Keep it. You've earned a receipt." He turned to his 3 men. "We're done here." The heavy man looked uncertain. The other 2 waited for confirmation. "Done," Burke said again with a finality that required no further support. The 3 men moved back toward the timber. The heavy one went last with the reluctant gait of a man who'd been ready for something and had to put it down unused. When they were gone, Burke stood alone at the edge of the clearing. He looked at Jack. "One more thing," he said. "Owen knows where your cabin is, not from me. He's had a contact in Leadville for a year, maintained in case you became relevant to his interests again." He paused. "The case moves fast from here. 2 weeks, perhaps 3, before charges are filed formally. Until then, Owen Montgomery is a free man who has just learned his position is collapsing, and men in that situation do not become more cautious." "Is that a warning?" Jack said. "It's an update," Burke said. "Use it how you see fit." He picked up his coat from where he'd draped it over the trough and put it on. "The disputed land claim you filed for the Briggs family 12 years ago is what made Owen careless with his records. His obsession with that case with you specifically made him document more than he should have in order to ensure he had grounds to pursue you legally if the opportunity came." He looked at Jack evenly, which gave Mrs. Montgomery the chance to copy what she found. "You set this in motion 12 years ago. I thought you should know that." He walked into the timber and was gone as clean and unhurried as he'd arrived. Denny was still at the edge of the south road. Burke stopped once without turning. "You're off the payroll, Denny." "I know it," Denny said. Burke moved on. Denny looked at Toby. "You held up real well," he said. "Kid like that through something like this." Toby considered him seriously. "Thank you for bringing me back to Mama." "Yeah," Denny said. He put his hat on. "You're welcome." He walked south without looking back. Jack watched him go and thought about the kind of decision that costs a man his income and his professional standing, and that he makes anyway, and he thought it was not a small thing. He turned back. Evelyn was 6 feet away with Toby against her side and her hand resting on the boy's shoulder. She was looking at Jack. "You gave him the bag," she said. "I was prepared to," Jack said. "The evidence was already on the stage. What was left in the lining wouldn't have finished the case without what I'd already sent." "You didn't tell me that." "There wasn't time for that conversation without losing everyone's attention from where I needed it." She looked at him for a long moment, and then something came into her face, not quite a laugh, not quite anything with a proper name, but something compressed and long-held, loosening its grip. "You are genuinely infuriating," she said. "People have said so," he said. Toby looked up at his mother. "Are we safe?" "For now," she said. "Yes." "And Mr. Callahan?" She looked at Jack. "Mr. Callahan can look after himself," she said. "I know," Toby said. "But is he safe?" Jack crouched to the boy's level. "I'm fine," he said. Toby studied him with those dark, careful eyes. "Mr. Burke said my papa isn't going to accept things. What does that mean?" Jack glanced at Evelyn. She gave him the look of a woman who'd decided this particular moment belonged to him. "It means we're not entirely finished," Jack said. "But we're in a considerably better position than we were this morning. Because of the papers. Because of the papers, the affidavit, and the fact that a federal commissioner in Denver is now waiting for what's on that stage." He kept his voice even, the way you speak to someone who deserves the truth in a form they can carry. "The man we thought was hunting us was doing something more complicated than hunting." Toby absorbed this. We were running from someone who was actually helping us. In a manner of speaking. That's very confusing, Toby said. It is, Jack agreed. But it worked out. The station master came back out of the building. He walked toward them with the deliberate pace of a man who'd decided something he'd been sitting on was now worth saying. Someone left a message this morning, he said. He held out a folded paper. Jack took it. No salutation. No signature. Just 6 words in a neat, careful hand. The stage is not the end. He looked up. Who left this? Man on horseback about half an hour before you arrived. Dark coat hat pulled low. Paid me $2 to hold it for whoever came asking about a Denver parcel. He paused. He said to tell whoever got it that Montgomery has already sent word to Glenwood Springs. The words hit the clearing like something dropped from a height. Evelyn's hand tightened on Toby's shoulder. Nora, she said, barely a sound. Your sister, Jack said. Owen always knew I'd go there. There was nowhere else. Her voice stayed controlled, but the effort it was taking showed now just at the edges. Nora lives alone. She has no way to, if Owen sent men ahead of us. How far by road? Jack said. Half a day, maybe more. By the northern pass. You said you knew it. 5 hours, he said. If we leave now, and we ride hard. The horses are back at the cabin. Station master. Jack turned. You got mounts for hire. 2, Greer said. They ain't pretty. Pretty doesn't interest me, Jack said. Fast and willing. 20 minutes later, he was cinching the girth on a bay mare that had opinions about being hurried and was not shy about expressing them. Evelyn was already mounted with Toby in front of her, her posture set in the particular forward way that meant a decision had been made, and she was already inside it. Jack got up. He sat for a moment. He thought about Burke's parting words. Owen cornered Owen, getting direct a man in Leadville who'd been watching for a year. He thought about a note left at a crossing with a station master, and what it said about how far Owen's reach extended, and how little of this was actually finished. He thought about a woman alone in Glenwood Springs who didn't know what was coming. He thought about Toby's hand in his in the dark, and the way the boy had said, "That's honest," with the gravity of someone who had been fed enough dishonesty to know the difference on contact. He thought about Margaret briefly, the way he always did when something cracked the room where he kept her, just her face, nothing elaborate. The face of the only person who had ever made him want to be the kind of man he sometimes managed to be. Then he put it away. There was a road ahead and time was burning. "Ready?" Evelyn said. He looked at her. The bag was still on her shoulder. The affidavit was in his vest pocket. The morning stage was 2 miles south, with the ledger copies under the driver's seat moving toward Denver and Harold Fitch, and the slow grinding machinery of federal law that Owen Montgomery had never once believed would reach him. "Try to keep up," Jack said. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Try to stay ahead," she said. He clicked his tongue, and the bay mare moved forward, and behind him, Evelyn's horse fell into step, and Toby gripped the pommel and said nothing and held on, and the northern road opened wide, and Jack rode into it with his eyes fixed forward and the knowledge sitting cold and clear in his chest that Owen Montgomery had reached Glenwood Springs before them. Not chasing anymore. Waiting. That was a different shape of problem entirely, and it required a different shape of answer. He rode. They rode hard. The Northern Pass Road was not built for the kind of pace Jack set, but Burl's replacement, the bay mare from Carpenter's Crossing, had more in her than she'd initially suggested, and she ran with the flat, committed stride of an animal that had decided the rider meant it. Evelyn's horse kept pace without being pushed. Toby sat in front of his mother with both hands on the pommel, and his chin down, riding the way a child rides when he understands that this is not the time to make himself a burden. They were an hour out when Toby said, "Mr. Callahan." Jack looked back without slowing. "There's a rider behind us," Toby said. "Back where the road bends. He's staying the same distance." Jack glanced over his shoulder. The road behind them was empty at this angle, but he trusted the boy's eyes. Toby had the particular unfiltered attention of a child who had spent weeks learning to notice things before adults did. "How long?" Jack said. "Since the crossing," Toby said. "Maybe before." Jack didn't change his pace. He didn't look back again. He filed at one rider hanging back, not closing, which meant observation rather than pursuit. Someone reporting their direction, which meant someone at the other end of that report was already moving. He rode faster. Glenwood Springs came up in the early afternoon, and they came in from the south road with dust on their clothes and hard miles behind them. Jack had been here 3 times in his life, and remembered enough the main road, the layout of the residential streets east of it, the way the town sat against the river. "Your sister's house," Jack said. "Where?" "East side, blue shutters, 2 blocks off the main road." Evelyn was scanning as she rode, doing the same calculations. He was looking for what was wrong before she could identify what was right. "There." He saw the house. Blue shutters exactly as described, a small yard, a porch with a rocking chair, and a horse tied at the post out front that belonged to no woman living alone. Jack pulled up before the house came fully into view. "Stay here," he said. "I won't," Evelyn said. "Stay here until I know what I'm riding into." He looked at her directly. 30 seconds. Give me 30 seconds." She held his gaze. Then she nodded once and held the horse still. Jack dismounted and walked the last 50 yards on foot, keeping to the side of the road, his hand loose at his side near the rifle. The horse at the post was a good one, not a working horse, not a ranch horse. A town horse well kept with a saddle that had never seen trail work. The kind of mount a wealthy man rode when he wanted to arrive looking like money. Jack stopped. He knew that saddle, not personally but by type, by what it meant. Owen Montgomery hadn't sent men ahead. Owen Montgomery had come himself. Jack went back to Evelyn. "It's him," he said. The color didn't leave her face. Instead, something in it went very still and very clear, the way a person looks when they've been dreading a thing for so long that the arrival of it is almost a relief. "Owen," she said. "In the house." "Is Nora—" "I don't know yet." He looked at her steadily. "But Owen Montgomery is a man who wants things to look a certain way. He won't do anything that can't be explained cleanly. Not in somebody else's house, not in a town where people know your sister's face." "He burned the Harlan house," she said. "In the dark, on a disputed claim with paid men he could disavow," Jack said. "This is different. This is personal, and personal makes men like Owen careful because personal leaves evidence." He watched her take that in. "We go in together, but we go in slow, and we go in with language first. You understand? Language first," she said. "And if language fails, then we deal with it," she said. And the echo of his own words from the night before came back to him and sat in a strange way in his chest. He looked at Toby. "You stay close to your mother," Jack said. "No matter what Owen says, no matter what he does, you stay at her side. Not behind me. At her side." "Yes, sir," Toby said. "Good." They walked to the house together, the 3 of them, and Jack put his hand on the door and opened it without knocking. The front room was small and neat. A woman Jack didn't know stood at the far wall with her arms crossed over her chest and her jaw set. Not terrified, just held in place by the particular calculation of someone who'd been told to stay still and was deciding how long to honor that instruction. She had Evelyn's eyes. Different face, same directness. Nora. Owen Montgomery stood in the center of the room. He was perhaps 45, well-dressed and well-fed, with the kind of self-possession that comes from decades of being the most powerful man in whatever room he entered. He was not physically large, but he carried himself as if he were, and that posture, that complete assumption of his own authority, was so practiced it had become structural. He looked like a man who had never once considered that an outcome might not go his way. He looked at Evelyn. He did not look at Jack at all, which was itself a kind of statement. "Evelyn," he said, calm, almost warm. "You look tired. You look like a man who rode a long way to be somewhere he shouldn't be," she said. "I came for my son," Owen said. He looked down at Toby, and his expression shifted not to warmth exactly, but to something he'd practiced until it resembled warmth well enough to use in public. "Toby, come here." Toby did not move. He stood at his mother's side exactly where Jack had told him to stand, and he looked at his father with those serious dark eyes, and he did not move 1 inch. Owen looked at his son for a moment. Something tightened around his eyes. "Toby," he said again with more weight in it. "He stays where he is," Evelyn said. Owen's gaze moved to her. "You took my son from his home." "I took my son from your house," she said. "That's a different thing, and you know it." The law you paid a judge to arrange," she said. "Yes, I know about that too." Owen's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind it. Something that recalculated. It was then that he looked at Jack. He took his time about it, the deliberate, unhurried assessment of a man who is deciding how much of a problem something is. "You're Callahan," he said. "I am," Jack said. "You filed the Briggs claim." "I did. Cost me 14 months and considerable legal expense," Owen said with the particular tone of a man for whom financial loss is the highest register of grievance. "I know," Jack said. "I don't regret it." Owen looked at him the way powerful men look at things they've decided are beneath their sustained attention. Then he looked back at Evelyn. "The papers you took," he said. "They're on a stage to Denver. I'm aware." A pause. "What you may not be aware of is that I telegraphed ahead to the Glenwood station an hour ago. The stage makes a scheduled stop there in approximately 40 minutes. The station master has instructions to hold any parcel addressed to Harold Fitch, pending investigation of fraudulent documentation." The room went very quiet. Nora made a sound from the wall, a short, sharp exhale. Evelyn looked at Jack. Owen saw the look and let a small, satisfied pause develop. "So," he said, "here's what I'm proposing. You come home, both of you. I withdraw the telegram. The station master lets the stage go. Whatever's in that parcel disappears into the commissioner's general files, which are processed by Gerald Ames, who processes them appropriately." He spread his hands, the gesture of a reasonable man offering reasonable terms. "Nobody goes to prison. Nobody loses anything they haven't already accepted losing. We go home." Jack looked at Owen Montgomery. He thought about the note on the trough at Carpenter's Crossing. The stage is not the end. He thought about Burke and the affidavit and the 6 months of federal case building that had been happening before any of them had ridden a mile of this road together. He thought about the Harlan family, the Deckers, Margaret riding out in bad weather to help a widow who wouldn't have needed help if a man exactly like Owen hadn't decided her land was worth more than her life. "The stage already passed the Glenwood station," Jack said. "It doesn't stop there on summer schedule. It goes straight through to the junction." He looked at Owen evenly. "And Harold Fitch was notified by wire this morning from Denver that the documentation was in transit and should be received directly bypassing the general intake process. Gerald Ames won't touch it." Owen's expression didn't move. "Burke," Jack said. "He works for the commissioner. Has for 6 months. You hired the one man in this territory who was already building the case against you." He held Owen's gaze without effort, without performance. "The telegram you sent is to an empty station, and the man you trusted to manage Fitch's office has already signed an affidavit against you." Owen Montgomery was very still. For the first time since Jack had walked through the door, the complete self-possession slipped. Just at the edges. Just enough. "You're lying," Owen said. "I've got the affidavit in my vest pocket," Jack said. "I'll show it to you if that's useful." Owen looked at him. The look had changed. The practiced authority was still there, but underneath it, something had shifted into a register that Jack recognized, the specific, dangerous stillness of a man who understands that he is losing and is deciding whether to accept it or escalate. Jack had seen men make that decision before. He'd seen it go both ways. He kept his eyes on Owen's hands. Nora moved. She had been against the wall with her arms crossed since they'd come through the door, and she'd been quiet in the particular way of a woman who was quiet on purpose, watching measuring. Now she stepped forward, and she spoke with a directness that reminded Jack with a physical jolt of her sister. "Owen," she said, "I know your name, and I know your face, and I know what my sister's wrist looked like when she got here last winter before any of this started. You are in my house, which means you are on my terms, and my terms are that you leave." Owen looked at her. "I don't have any business with you," he said. "You walked into my house," Nora said. "That made it your business with me." She uncrossed her arms. "And if you don't leave in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to walk out this door and find the town marshal, and I'm going to tell him exactly who you are and exactly what you told me when you walked in here an hour ago, which includes the part about the judge in Pueblo County, which you told me, I think, because you assumed I was too afraid to repeat it." She looked at him with those familiar eyes that were not afraid of anything he had. "You assumed wrong." Owen looked at Nora. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at Jack. His man, who had been standing near the kitchen door since they came in, a large, quiet presence that Jack had been aware of from the first second, shifted his weight onto his front foot. Jack turned his head toward the man. Just his head. He didn't reach for the rifle. He just looked at the man with the particular, unhurried attention of someone who has already completed the relevant calculation and is simply waiting to see if it becomes necessary to demonstrate it. The man went very still. "We'll go," Owen said. His voice was controlled. His face was controlled. Everything about him was controlled, which was the most dangerous form. Not the man who rages, but the man who compresses. The man who leaves and then considers his options without the heat of the moment distorting his judgment. "Owen," Evelyn said. He stopped. She stepped forward. Not toward him, just out of the group into her own space, standing in the center of the room with her canvas bag on her shoulder and 3 weeks of road on her clothes and nothing in her face that resembled apology. "I want you to hear me clearly," she said. "Not through a lawyer, not through Burke or whoever you send next. I want you to hear it from me in this room, so there is no interpretation possible." Owen looked at her. "I am not coming back," she said. "Toby is not coming back. Not because of the papers or the commissioner or any legal instrument. Those things matter, and they'll do what they'll do. But I want you to understand that the answer is no, regardless of the outcome. You could walk out of this situation entirely free and clear, and the answer would still be no." She held his gaze without flinching, without anger, without anything except the clean directness of a woman who is done. "I want you to be certain of that. So you stop sending people." Owen looked at her for a long moment. "You'll need money," he said. "Eventually, both of you will. We'll manage." "On what?" "On what we have," she said, "which is more than you ever gave us." Something in Owen's face, just briefly, just at the deepest layer, was something that might have been recognition. The recognition of a man who understands for the first time that the thing he lost was not property. Then it closed off, and he was just a well-dressed man in a borrowed house, and he turned and walked out the door, and his man followed, and the sound of the horse at the post came through the walls, movement, departure, hoofbeats going south. Then silence. Nora let out a long breath. She looked at her sister. "You," she said, "have a great deal to tell me." Evelyn crossed the room in 4 steps, and the two women held each other, not dramatically, not with tears, just the firm, complete embrace of sisters who have been in separate kinds of danger and have found each other intact on the other side of it. Toby pressed himself against both of them, and nobody said anything for a moment. Jack stood near the door. He looked at the wall. He turned his hat in his hands. When Evelyn stepped back, her eyes found him. "You knew," she said, "about the stage schedule." "I know the routes," he said. "And Fitch being notified by wire. Burke said he'd been in contact with the commissioner for 6 months, Jack said. A 6-month operation doesn't run without wire communication. Fitch knew what was coming. I took a reasonable chance that the general intake process had already been flagged." She looked at him. "A reasonable chance. Most of what I've done in the last 18 hours has been a reasonable chance," he said. "They've held so far." Something moved in her face. "Jack." He looked at her. "Sit down," she said. "Please. You've been standing like you're ready to leave since you walked in." He looked at the chair near the window. He sat down. Nora disappeared toward the kitchen with Toby, who had started asking about whether there was anything to eat with the pragmatic focus of a child whose body had begun reasserting its requirements now that the immediate emergency had passed. The sound of them in the kitchen. Nora's voice. Toby's quick questions, the particular domestic percussion of a house that had someone in it again, filled the small house with something that Jack had not been in the same room as in a very long time. He sat with his hat in his hands. Evelyn sat in the other chair. She set the canvas bag on the floor beside her. She looked at him in the straightforward way that was just the way she looked at things, and he'd stopped being unsettled by it sometime in the last 12 hours without noticing the exact moment it changed. "Why did you really do it?" she said. "Not the reason you told me at the cabin, the real one." He looked at the floor for a moment. "I told you the real one," he said. "You told me Owen cost you your wife," she said. "That's true. But men who want revenge don't ride 4 miles through the dark with a woman and a boy they've never met and give away their only bargaining chip to find out where the child is. That's not revenge. That's something else." He was quiet for a moment. "Margaret used to say I had a problem," he said finally. "She said I could walk past 100 things that needed doing and not see any of them, but the one thing that was mine to do, I couldn't walk past that one. She said it wasn't virtue. She said it was stubbornness pointed in the right direction." Evelyn said nothing. "When you asked for my leftovers," he said, "I looked at you and I looked at that boy and I knew. That was mine to do. I don't know how to explain it better than that." He turned the hat in his hands. "I've been sitting in that chair for 3 years because nothing was mine to do. And then you showed up." The kitchen sounds continued, Toby laughing at something Nora said, the solid and ordinary music of a child who was for the moment safe and fed and unafraid. "She sounds like she was extraordinary," Evelyn said. "She was plain-spoken, and she was honest, and she thought I was better than I was," Jack said. "That's the best thing a person can be for another person." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. "You are better than you think you are," she said. "For whatever that's worth from someone who's known you less than a day." He looked at her. "It's worth something," he said. Toby appeared in the kitchen doorway with a biscuit in each hand and flour on his chin, which suggested Nora had already found him something to do with his energy. "Mr. Callahan," he said. "Aunt Nora says you should stay for supper." Jack looked at Evelyn. "Aunt Nora runs her house the way your sister runs most things," he said. "I noticed." "Is that a yes?" Toby said. "That's a yes," Jack said. Toby disappeared back into the kitchen with the focused satisfaction of a mission accomplished, and Jack sat in the chair by the window and thought about Owen Montgomery riding south and what came next. The federal case, the charges, the grinding legal machinery that would take months and require Evelyn to be present for, and that would cost her more before it gave her anything back. He thought about Nora's voice when she'd told Owen to leave. The same set of the jaw as her sister, different shape, same substance. He thought about the affidavit in his pocket, and what it represented, not the end of anything, but the beginning of the kind of ending that was actually built to hold. And he thought about what Evelyn had said. "You are better than you think you are." He held on to that for a moment. He didn't examine it too closely the way you don't examine something fragile in bad light. He just held it and let it sit alongside the stone in his chest that had been there for 3 years. And he noticed with something that was neither surprise nor relief, but a quieter thing, that the stone felt different than it had this morning. Not smaller, just less alone. Somewhere in the kitchen, Toby asked Nora if there was any pie. Nora said there would be by supper time if somebody helped make it. Toby said he would help, and then immediately clarified that he would help eat it specifically. Nora laughed a real laugh, full and warm, and Jack heard Evelyn beside him make a sound that was small and involuntary, and was the sound of a person who has not laughed in a very long time, hearing the person she loves most make someone else laugh. He didn't look at her. He gave her that moment the way she'd given him the truth at the cabin quietly, without making it into anything that had to be named. The afternoon light came through the window and sat on the floor between their chairs, and outside, Owen Montgomery was riding south toward a legal reckoning that had been 3 weeks and 12 years in the making, and in the kitchen, a 7-year-old boy was learning what it felt like to be somewhere safe enough to make a joke about pie. Jack stayed in the chair. He didn't go anywhere. Supper that evening was the kind that happens when people have been through something hard and come out the other side and haven't yet fully processed what they survived. Nora made biscuits and beans, and a cobbler with dried peaches that Toby ate 2 portions of before his chin started dropping toward his chest. He fought it the way children fight sleep when they're afraid they'll miss something important, and lost badly going under mid-sentence, with his spoon still in his hand. Evelyn caught the spoon. She and Nora shared a look over his head that had an entire conversation in it without a word exchanged. Jack helped Nora clear the table without being asked, which made Nora study him sideways in the way of a woman recalibrating a first impression. "You don't say much," Nora said at the kitchen basin. "I say what needs saying," Jack said. "Evelyn's the same way," Nora said. "She used to talk more. Before Owen." She handed him a dish to dry. "She's talking more again. I noticed it at supper, in the last hour." She looked at him. "I think that's your doing." "I don't think I did much," Jack said. "You did enough," Nora said, and handed him another dish and left it there. He slept on the porch that night with his rifle across his knees. Not because he expected Owen to come back, but because old habits have their own momentum, and the porch was where his instincts put him. He sat with the summer dark and the sound of the town settling into itself, and the particular quality of quiet that comes after a long and exhausting day when everything has gone as well as it reasonably could have. He thought about what came next. He was still thinking about it when the sky started to change. He was up and had his gear collected before full light. He moved quietly. He was practiced at quiet, and he was at the porch steps with his hat on when the door opened behind him. He turned. Toby stood in the doorway in his stocking feet, his hair going in several directions, his face carrying the specific accusation that only a child can produce without saying a single word. "You were going to leave," Toby said. Jack looked at the boy. "I was going to get the horses," he said. "You were going to leave," Toby said again, not louder, just more certain. Jack set his gear down on the porch step. "I don't belong here, son," he said. "This is your aunt's house. You and your mama are safe. The papers are in Denver. What needed doing is done." "You belong here," Toby said, flat and plain, and with the particular unargued authority of a 7-year-old who has decided something and sees no reason to qualify it. Jack opened his mouth. "Don't," said Evelyn. He turned. She was standing behind Toby in the doorway, dressed, her hair pinned, holding a coffee cup. She had the look of someone who had also not slept much and had made use of that time for thinking. "Come inside," she said. "Evelyn. Come inside, Jack." He came inside. Nora appeared briefly from the kitchen, assessed the situation with a single look, handed Jack a cup of coffee, and disappeared again, with the diplomatic efficiency of a woman who understood exactly when her presence was not required. Toby went to the kitchen after her, which Jack suspected was not entirely spontaneous. He stood in the front room with his coffee cup. Evelyn sat in the chair she'd sat in yesterday and looked up at him. "Sit down," she said. "Please stop standing like you're already halfway out the door." He sat. "You were going to leave without saying anything," she said. "I was going to get the horses and come back and say something," he said. She looked at him. "All right," he said. "I wasn't sure what to say." "That's honest," she said. The echo of Toby's words from the loft 2 nights ago was deliberate, and she knew he'd catch it. He looked at his coffee cup. "What I did, what I was able to do, it mattered because of the particular circumstances. The surveying background, knowing Fitch, knowing the pass road. Those things were useful here." He paused. "They're not reasons for anything beyond here." "Nobody said they were," Evelyn said. "I'm a man who lives alone on a mountain," he said. I built that life on purpose. I know. It's not a life that has room in it for—" He stopped. "For what?" she said. He looked at her. "For what you deserve," he said. "You and Toby. You deserve something that's already built, something stable and settled. Not a man who sleeps in a chair because he can't make himself sleep in a bed, and who hasn't spoken more than a dozen words at a stretch to another person in 3 years, and who is better at moving through timber in the dark than he is at—" He stopped again. "At this." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Jack," she said, "I just spent 3 weeks sleeping on the ground with my son to get away from a man who was settled and stable and already built." She met his eyes with that direct look that he had stopped trying to brace for. "I am not looking for built. I am looking for honest. I can do the rest of it myself." He said nothing. "I'm not asking you for anything," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not asking. I'm telling you that if you leave this morning because you think it's what's best for us, you're making a decision on our behalf that you don't have the right to make." She held his gaze. "We get to decide what we want, not you." The front door opened. Both of them looked up. Nora came in from outside with an envelope in her hand, and an expression that meant the envelope was not ordinary mail. She held it out to Jack. "Stage writer just came through," she said. "Asked for you by name." Jack took it. He looked at the return address. Federal Land Commissioner's Office, Denver, Colorado. He opened it carefully. It was a single page. Harold Fitch's handwriting, he recognized it from 12 years of correspondence. Concise, precise, with the measured weight of a man who chose every word on purpose. Jack Packett received intact chain of custody confirmed. Contents as expected, and then some. Ames's affidavit in hand. Charges being filed against Owen Montgomery Friday next on 7 counts, including fraud, forced displacement, and obstruction of federal survey rights. Arrest warrant issued this morning. He will not be traveling freely much longer. The Harlan and Decker families have been notified. Restitution proceedings begin within the month. Well done. H. Fitch. Jack read it twice. He looked up. Evelyn was watching him. "It's done," he said. He held out the letter. She took it. She read it. He watched her face as she did the careful composure. Holding, and then, at the line about the Harlan and Decker families, something gave way. Not dramatically, just a small, private fracture in the composure there, and then gone, sealed back up with the practiced discipline of a woman who had learned to feel things without letting them run. She folded the letter. She handed it back. "Friday," she said. "By the time he rides south and discovers what's waiting." Jack said, "He won't have anywhere to go." Nora sat down on the edge of the table with her arms crossed and looked at the two of them. "So it's over," she said. "The legal piece," Jack said. "Yes, and the rest of it," Nora said with the blunt directness of a woman who had watched her sister carry something crushing for years and had earned the right to ask a pointed question. Neither Jack nor Evelyn answered immediately. From the kitchen, Toby said, "Mr. Callahan, can I show you something?" Jack looked at the kitchen doorway. "Yeah," he said. "In a minute." "It's important," Toby said. Nora stood up. She looked at Jack with the measuring look that was her sister's, but with more amusement in it. "He's been practicing that question since he woke up," she said. "Came to find me at first light, asking what the most important thing he could show you was." She went back to the kitchen. "Don't keep him waiting too long." Jack set his coffee down and went to the kitchen doorway. Toby was standing at the kitchen table with a piece of paper in front of him, and on the paper was a drawing done in pencil, careful and serious, with the concentrated effort of a child who had worked at it. It was 3 figures, a tall one, a medium one, and a small one, and they were on horses, and below the horses, in careful uneven letters, it said us going north. Jack stood at the doorway and looked at the drawing. He looked at the boy. Toby looked back at him with those dark eyes. "I drew it last night," Toby said. "When I woke up and couldn't sleep, Aunt Nora gave me the pencil." He looked at the paper and then back up. I put you in it. I hope that's all right." Jack crossed to the table. He looked at the drawing for a long moment, the 3 careful figures on 3 careful horses, the uneven letters, the particular gravity of something a child makes when he's trying to put something true into a form that will last. "It's all right," Jack said. "You can keep it," Toby said. "If you want." Jack picked up the drawing carefully. He folded it once gently and put it in his vest pocket, the same pocket that had held the affidavit and Burke's note and all the paper evidence of the last 3 days, and he pressed it flat with his palm. "Thank you," he said. Toby looked at the pocket, then at Jack's face. "Are you going to stay?" he said. Jack looked at the boy for a long moment. "I don't know yet," he said. That's the honest answer. "That's okay," Toby said. "You said honest is better even when it's scary." "I did say that." "So." Toby folded his hands on the table with the solemn deliberation of a very small man conducting a very serious conversation. "Are you scared?" Jack sat down in the kitchen chair across from him. "Yeah," he said. "A little." Toby nodded slowly. Like this was the most reasonable thing he'd heard. "Mama's scared too," he said. "She pretends she isn't, but I can tell." He looked at Jack. "She's better when you're around. She talks more. Her shoulders go down." He demonstrated dropping his own small shoulders from where he'd been holding them near his ears. "Like that. When people stop being scared, their shoulders go down." Jack looked at the boy. "When'd you get so observant?" he said. "I always was," Toby said. "I just didn't have anybody worth telling it to before." A sound came from the front room, the particular sound of someone trying to give other people space while being right next door. Evelyn's voice, low, talking to Nora. Then Nora's response, which had a laugh in it that it was trying not to be, and failing. Jack sat in the kitchen chair with Toby across from him and the drawing in his vest pocket, and the weight of everything that had happened in the last 3 days sitting in his chest alongside the stone. That was no longer entirely stone. Something had gone through it, or softened it, or simply reframed what it was made of, and he was not sure which, only that it felt different than it had when he'd walked into Holt's saloon 2 evenings ago, looking for nothing. He stood up. "Stay here," he said to Toby. "You keep saying that," Toby observed. "And you keep minding," Jack said. "So it's working." He went back to the front room. Evelyn looked up when he came in. Nora found something to do in the other direction. "I have to go back to the cabin," Jack said. Evelyn's expression shifted just slightly. "The horses are there," he said. "The bay mare from the crossing is borrowed, and she needs returning. There are things I left that need dealing with." He paused. "And there's something I need to decide." "About what?" Evelyn said. "About whether a man who built a life around keeping everybody out has any right to change his mind about that." He looked at her directly. "I want to do it right. I don't want to do it in a kitchen while everyone's still catching their breath. I want to think it through the way a decision like that deserves." She looked at him for a long moment. "How long?" she said. "A week," he said. "Maybe less." She was quiet. "Evelyn," he said. "I heard you," she said. "I'll come back," he said. "I know," she said. And she said it with the particular tone of a woman who does not say things she doesn't mean. He picked up his gear from the porch. He put his hat on. He went to Toby, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway with the timing of a child who had been listening for exactly this moment. "I have to go get the horses," Jack said. Toby looked up at him. "You'll come back, though," Toby said. Same tone as his mother, same certainty. "Yeah," Jack said. "I'll come back." Toby put out his hand. Not for a handshake, just his open palm the way children offer when they want contact, but don't know what form to put it in. Jack closed his hand around it. 1 full second. Then he let go. He left. He rode back through the pass road alone, which was very different from riding it the first time. The first time, it had been urgency and darkness, and the weight of someone else's danger. This time, it was just the mountain and the road, and his own mind working through something it had been avoiding for 3 years. He reached the cabin in the late afternoon. He stood in the middle of the room for a long time without doing anything. He looked at the chair where he'd slept for 3 years. He looked at the 2 chairs at the table. He looked at the loft where Evelyn and Toby had slept 2 nights ago, and at the pallet that still held the shape of 2 people who'd been tired enough to sleep through danger. He thought about Margaret. He let himself think about her properly, not the locked room version, not the flash of her face he allowed himself in difficult moments. He thought about her actually fully, the way he'd been afraid to for 3 years. Because fully was the version that acknowledged she was gone, and had left him here, and that here was a place he still had to inhabit. He thought about what she would have said. She would have said you are sitting in a chair in a cabin, arguing with yourself about whether you deserve to be a person again, and I need you to stop that immediately. She would have said it plain, and she would have said it kindly, and she would have been right. He sat in the chair. He sat there for a while. Then he got up and he started doing what needed doing. He was at the table writing when he heard a horse on the road outside. He didn't reach for the rifle. He'd become better at distinguishing between the sounds that required a rifle and the sounds that didn't, and this one didn't. The knock at the door was light. 3 times. He opened it. Denny stood on the porch. He had a new hat and a clean shirt and a proper badge, the real kind, county-issued, pinned at a correct angle on his chest. Jack looked at the badge. Deputy Marshal, Denny said. 3 days ago. Marshal in town needed someone who knew the territory. He paused. I told him I'd spent the last week learning it pretty thoroughly. Jack looked at the young man for a moment. Come in, he said. Denny came in. He turned his hat in his hands and looked around the cabin with the slightly awkward courtesy of someone who isn't sure how long they're staying. Owen Montgomery was arrested this morning, Denny said, in Buena Vista. He was trying to reach a contact in New Mexico who he thought could help him move assets before the federal case closed. He met Jack's eyes. He didn't make it. I heard charges were being filed Friday, Jack said. They were filed Thursday. Fitch moved faster than expected once the documentation arrived. A pause. Ames cooperated fully. Apparently, he'd been wanting to get out from under Owen's arrangement for 2 years, and the immunity offer was what he'd been waiting for. Jack sat down across from the young deputy. Why'd you come all the way out here to tell me that? He said. Denny was quiet for a moment. He looked at the badge on his chest, then back up. Because I wanted you to know the ending, he said. You gave me something that day at the crossing, when you told me to think about who I was working for and what it was worth. He stopped. I've been thinking about what things are worth. I figured I owed you the news. Jack looked at the young man across the table, at the badge that was straight, and the hat that was clean, and the particular expression of someone who has made a hard choice and is still in the process of discovering whether it was right. You did the right thing, Jack said. At the crossing with the boy. That was the right thing. I know, Denny said. It just took me longer than it should have to know it. Most right things do, Jack said. Denny stayed for coffee and left before dark, riding back toward Glenwood Springs with the straight-backed posture of a young man who had somewhere legitimate to be. Jack sat at the table after he left. He looked at what he'd been writing. A letter to Harold Fitch formally accepting the offer of work as a field surveyor for the Commissioner's Land Recovery Office in the Glenwood Springs District, work that had been extended to him 3 years ago and that he'd declined because 3 years ago he hadn't seen the point of anything. The work would keep him in the territory. It would give him a reason to be in town on a regular basis. It was not a declaration. It was not a promise of something he couldn't guarantee. It was a man pointing himself in a direction. He finished the letter. He folded it. He addressed it. He looked at the 2 chairs at the table. He looked at the loft. He looked at the chair in the corner where he'd slept. He left the chair where it was. He went to the bed, the one he'd made, and not used in 3 years, and he put clean blankets on it, and he pressed them flat with his palms, and he stood back and looked at what he'd done. It was not a large thing, but it was the kind of thing that meant something when a man does it. 6 days later, Jack Callahan rode into Glenwood Springs on Burl with the bay mare on a lead line behind him, and the Fitch letter already posted, and a drawing of 3 figures on horses folded carefully in his vest pocket, and he tied both horses at Nora's post and knocked on the door and waited. Evelyn opened it. She looked at him, at the 2 horses, at the settled certain way he was standing, not like a man ready to leave, not like a man performing a stay, but like a man who had thought it through and come to the other side of it, and was simply here. "You came back," she said. "I said I would," he said. She stepped aside and let him in. Toby came out of the kitchen at a run, skidded to a stop in front of Jack, and looked up at him with those serious dark eyes. "You stayed gone 6 days," Toby said. "I counted." "I had things to take care of," Jack said. "And a letter to write." "What letter?" "A job letter," Jack said. "I'm going to be doing surveying work for the Federal Land Commissioner, out of this district." He looked at the boy steadily. "Which means I'll be around." Toby took this in. He processed it the way he processed everything seriously, completely without rushing it. "Around like near here," he said. "Near here," Jack said. "Like how near?" "Near enough," Jack said. Toby looked at him for one more long moment. Then he turned around and walked back toward the kitchen. "Aunt Nora," he called out. "He came back, and he's staying near." Nora's voice came back from the kitchen. "I know. I can see the horses from the window. Set another place at the table." Evelyn stood in the front room and looked at Jack, and Jack looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment because neither of them needed to. Some understandings don't require language. They require only the willingness to stand in the same room and let it be real. He handed her the folded drawing from his vest pocket. She looked at it, the 3 figures on horses, the uneven letters "Us Going North," and her expression did something that had no name, but had everything in it. She folded it back carefully. She handed it to him. "Keep it," she said. "It's yours." He put it back in his pocket. He sat down at the table in the chair that was his, now in the house that was not his, but that had a place in it that was, and outside the summer was doing what Colorado summers do in the long evenings, sitting warm and unhurried over everything. And inside, Nora was setting a plate at the table, and Toby was telling her something important about horses, and Evelyn was in the kitchen doorway watching Jack the way she watched everything directly and without looking away. And Jack Callahan, who had walked into a saloon 2 weeks ago with nothing to do and nothing to want, and 3 years of deliberate, careful emptiness behind him, sat in that chair and felt the stone in his chest for the last time, because it wasn't a stone anymore. It was ballast. It was the weight of everything he'd loved and lost that had made him steady enough to be useful when it counted, and steady enough now to sit at a table set for 4, and let that be exactly what it was. He had come down from the mountain to eat cold beans alone. He had stayed because a woman with fire in her eyes had asked for his leftovers, and what she'd gotten instead, what they'd both gotten, was something neither of them had planned for, and neither of them was prepared to give back. That was the whole of it, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was, for the first time in 3 years, everything.